On December 7, 1971, Westfield, New Jersey police received a request to check the house at 431 Hillside Avenue. Neighbors were concerned as they had not seen any members of the List family for over a month. After knocking multiple times with no response, police decided to break down the door. Immediately, they were met with a horrifying scene: 5 bodies lying neatly on the living room floor, covered with blankets, as the air was thick with the stench of decomposition. The victims were identified as follows: the lady of the house, Helen List, 46 years old, 3 children; Patricia List, 16 years old; John Jr., 15 years old; Frederick List, 13 years old, and the elderly mother, Alma List, 84 years old. Evidence at the scene showed that all 5 victims had been shot with a 9mm and .22 caliber handgun. However, police discovered an important clue on the desk in the library: a carefully typed 5-page suicide note. The letter not only confirmed the identity of the perpetrator, but also revealed the chilling motive behind the heinous crime. So what really happened inside the mansion at 431 Hillside Avenue? Like and subscribe to our channel as we uncover the dark mystery and shocking details of today's story that you've never heard before. On September 17, 1925, in Bay City, Michigan, USA, John Emil List was born into a strict Lutheran family that valued discipline and the fear of God. He was the only son of a German couple, John Frederick List and Alma List. List's father was a strict religious man who raised his son in a rigid environment based on religious principles and strict discipline. This upbringing led List to develop a reserved personality, making it difficult for him to socialize and causing him to adhere strictly to rigid values. However, he was an intelligent student, excelling particularly in mathematics and finance. In 1943, John List graduated from Bay City High School with outstanding academic performance. After high school, List enlisted in the United States Army in 1943, serving in World War II as an air defense technician. In 1944, List's father passed away, but as he was serving in the military, List was unable to attend the funeral. After the war ended in 1946, List was discharged and began pursuing higher education. He attended the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor and graduated with a bachelor's degree in business administration, later earning a master's degree in accounting. With sharp intelligence and logical thinking, List was quickly promoted to lieutenant through the Reserve Officers Training Corps (ROTC) program. However, when the Korean War broke out in November 1950, List was recalled to active duty in the military. During his time in the military, John List met Helen Morris. She was a widow whose first husband, a military officer, had died while serving in Korea. Helen lived near the base with her only daughter, Brenda. John and Helen quickly developed feelings for each other, and on December 1, 1951, they got married in Baltimore, Maryland. After that, the family moved to North Carolina, where John continued his work in the military. Recognizing John's exceptional accounting skills, the military reassigned him to the finance unit instead of combat. After completing his second military service in 1952, John List was officially discharged and began working as an accountant at a financial company in Detroit. Later, he was hired as an audit supervisor at a paper manufacturing company. Not long after, John and Helen welcomed 3 new members to their family: Patricia List, born in 1955, John Jr. List, born in 1956, and Frederick List, born in 1958. By 1959, John List had been promoted to senior supervisor in the accounting department. However, as John List's career flourished, his wife Helen began to fall into crisis. Helen increasingly fell into alcoholism, severely affecting her health and mental state. Moreover, she suffered from neurosyphilis, a disease contracted from her first husband. But Helen had kept this a secret and never revealed it to John before they married in 1960. Throughout 18 years of marriage, List was completely unaware of this illness, assuming that his wife's deteriorating health was due to stress. Helen became more reclusive, rarely leaving the house and avoiding socializing with neighbors. After Helen's daughter from her previous marriage, Brenda, grew up, she met her partner, got married, and moved out of the family home. Not long after, John received a job offer from Xerox and decided to move the entire family to Rochester, New York. There, he gradually climbed the ranks, eventually securing the position of Director of Accounting Services. By 1965, with ambitions of finding a better position, John accepted the role of Vice President at a bank in New Jersey. Wanting a home that matched his new status, he moved his family into Breeze Knoll, a grand 19-room Victorian mansion located at 431 Hillside Avenue, Westfield, New Jersey. Breeze Knoll was a magnificent estate, featuring a large ballroom, luxurious interiors, and a separate living area for John's mother. However, no parties were ever held there, as the family lived in seclusion, keeping their distance from neighbors. John was a proud man who firmly believed that a husband and father's responsibility was to ensure his family lived comfortably. However, in 1971, the bank where he worked suddenly shut down, leaving him unemployed and plunging him into a severe financial crisis. With no source of income, John struggled to cover household expenses, including the mansion's maintenance, cars, tuition for his children, and other essential costs. Despite this, he maintained an illusion of stability. Every morning, John followed his usual routine, waking up early, having breakfast with his family, dressing formally, and leaving home on time as if he were still employed. But in reality, he was unemployed. Instead of going to work, John spent his days wandering around, attending job interviews or reading newspapers at Westfield train station. To maintain his family's luxurious lifestyle, John started withdrawing money from his mother's savings account and transferring it to his own account to cover expenses. However, this money could only sustain him for a short time. The mounting financial pressure, combined with his distorted sense of honor and religious beliefs, pushed him toward a horrifying decision. Finally, on November 9, 1971, John List decided to murder his entire family. On November 5, 1971, just 4 days before the massacre, John List asked his family a chilling question. He inquired how they would like their bodies to be handled after their deaths. His family members were shocked by the strange question, but did not realize the severity of the situation. They assumed John was just trying to lighten the tense atmosphere with a bizarre joke, unaware that it was actually a final warning before the impending tragedy. On November 9th, just before the massacre, John left a note for the milkman, requesting the cancellation of future deliveries. He said that the family would be traveling for an extended period, so they would temporarily stop receiving regular services like mail and food deliveries. By doing this, John hoped to delay the discovery of the crime, giving him enough time to leave the scene before an investigation began. Without hesitation, John stepped into the kitchen and fired a shot at his wife's face, killing her instantly. Next, John calmly went upstairs to his mother Alma's room and without hesitation, executed her immediately. When his daughter Patricia and youngest son Frederick returned home from school, John coldly shot each of them in the head as soon as they walked through the door. After the mass murder, John casually sat down at the dining table, prepared himself a meal, and ate right next to the bodies as if nothing had happened. He then drove to the bank to close all of his mother's savings accounts. About 20 minutes later, he went to Westfield High School to watch his eldest son, John Jr., play football. He stood there, calmly watching the game, appearing like a normal father with no signs of guilt or tension. When the game ended, John drove his son home. As soon as they entered the house, the boy had no time to react before John suddenly opened fire. But this time, he did not stop at just one shot. Forensic evidence later revealed that John Jr. had multiple wounds due to his father missing his initial shots. This suggested that the boy had fought back before being overpowered and killed. After killing his entire family, John List methodically cleaned up the crime scene, erasing any evidence, and continued his life as if nothing had happened. He removed all the pictures of himself from the house, then turned on the radio to a religious station, as if trying to soothe his mind and create a calm, peaceful atmosphere. John placed the bodies of his wife and 3 children neatly in sleeping bags on the ballroom floor. However, his mother's body was left upstairs in the attic. He then calmly sat at his desk in the library, turned on his typewriter, and carefully wrote a document explaining his thoughts on the massacre he had just committed. After finishing, he printed a 5-page letter and placed it neatly on the desk where he had been sitting. In the letter, John stated that killing his family was to save their souls, as he feared that as they grew older, his children would lose their faith. At this moment, I know that they are all devout Christians, but I cannot be sure of that in the future as they grow up. John List was extremely careful in covering up his crime. He sent letters to his children's school and part-time workplaces, informing them that they would be visiting their grandmother in North Carolina for a few weeks. In reality, Helen's mother had canceled her visit to Westfield due to health reasons. John List later revealed that if she had actually come, she too would have been his sixth victim. Afterward, John left the mansion, leaving everything intact, making it seem as though the family had gone on vacation as planned. John List's meticulous planning ensured that the massacre was not discovered until nearly a month later, on December 7th. Neighbors began to notice that all the lights in the mansion remained on day and night, yet they saw no one from the List family. When the light bulb started burning out without being replaced, neighbors grew suspicious and decided to call the police. Less than 15 minutes later, officers arrived at the scene. They approached the house, repeatedly ringing the doorbell and knocking, but received no response. After waiting for some time, the police decided to break down the door and enter. They immediately discovered 4 bodies neatly placed in sleeping bags on the ballroom floor. Another body was found in a room in the attic. This case quickly attracted nationwide attention, becoming one of the most notorious massacres in New Jersey's history. After examining the crime scene, the police initially suspected someone with a vendetta against the List family, but no viable leads were found, since the List family had lived a very secluded life. However, when police checked the List family's household records, they noticed an unusual detail. The owner of the mansion was John Emil List, but he was not present at the crime scene. All credible photographs of him had been destroyed, making identification extremely difficult. At the same time, police discovered the 5-page letter that John List had left behind. In the letter, he confessed to all his crimes and explained why he decided to kill his wife, 3 children, and mother. Based on the evidence at the scene, police confirmed that John List was the prime suspect. Meanwhile, the family's blue 1963 Chevrolet Impala was found parked at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York, but there was no evidence that John had boarded a flight. Could this have been a tactic to mislead the police? After a long investigation, police were unable to find any further leads on John List and sought assistance from the FBI. After John List disappeared at the end of 1971, police and the FBI reviewed reports from train stations, airports, and travel records from that time. They analyzed resources such as train tickets, financial transactions, and witness statements about newcomers in Denver at the time. Through an extensive and complex investigation, the FBI discovered that John List had moved from New Jersey to Michigan and then continued west to Colorado, where he started a new life under the alias Robert Peter. He had taken this name from a former college classmate, but that classmate later stated that he did not even know John List. A year after the crime, the Breeznole mansion remained abandoned until it was mysteriously burned down in August 1972, 9 months after the murders. Although the fire was officially ruled as arson, no suspect was ever identified. After the fire, a new house was built on the same site in 1974. The fire destroyed potential evidence, causing the case to remain unsolved for many years. In 1989, prosecutors in New Jersey devised a new strategy to reopen the investigation and search for new leads. They enlisted forensic artist Frank Bender to create an age-progressed bust of what John List might look like after 17 years. Using forensic aging techniques, police made a major breakthrough in the case. In May 1989, the television program America's Most Wanted, aired on Fox, covered the Westfield family massacre and broadcast the forensic bust of the suspect. Less than 2 weeks after the episode aired, on June 1st, a Denver resident reported to police that the image looked exactly like his neighbor, Robert Peter. Police immediately arrested John List. At first, John stubbornly insisted that he was Robert Peter. However, by February 1990, police revealed fingerprint evidence proving that Robert Peter's fingerprints matched John List's military records from 1943. Faced with undeniable evidence, John was forced to admit his true identity. During interrogation, he casually confessed to all his crimes. He explained that after losing his job, he saw only two options: either live on welfare or kill his family to send them to heaven. For John, living on welfare was unacceptable, as he believed it would bring shame to his family and go against the strict teachings of his father. However, he had committed a crime that his father surely would have never approved of. After leaving his confession letter, he wanted to escape New Jersey and start over as Robert Peter. From 1979 to 1986, he worked at a box manufacturing plant outside Denver. During this time, he actively participated in a local church and even organized transportation services for members without vehicles. At a church gathering, John List met his second wife, Dolores Miller, an employee at a military PX store. They married in 1985. In February 1988, the couple moved to Brandermill, Virginia, where List continued working as an accountant for a small company. When questioned about his motive, John claimed that his actions were meant to free his family from life's hardships and send them to heaven. However, the police posed a crucial question. If he truly believed that, why didn't he take his own life after killing his family? According to his distorted religious beliefs, committing suicide was an unforgivable sin, meaning he would not be able to join his family in heaven. On May 1, 1990, at the Union County Courthouse in New Jersey, the jury took only a few hours to reach their final verdict. John List was sentenced to life in prison without parole. After his sentencing, John List served his time at New Jersey State Prison. On March 21, 2008, John List died at the New Jersey State Prison Hospital due to pneumonia. He was 82 years old. When news of John M. List's death was announced, most Americans saw it as the inevitable and deserved fate for a man who had ruthlessly murdered his own family and evaded justice for nearly 2 decades. Thank you for following this story. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to never miss more shocking crime cases and mysteries. Remember, no matter how terrifying the truth is, it must be told to ensure justice is always upheld. In 1990, the body of Beverly McGowan, a bank employee, was discovered in a remote swamp in Florida, USA. What seemed like an ordinary murder case turned out to be the key to unveiling the whereabouts of a criminal that took police decades to find. None other than the infamous chameleon killer, Elaine Parent. She was a mysterious woman with the ability to continuously change her appearance and identity. Elaine committed numerous frauds and identity thefts across the US and Europe. The FBI issued an international arrest warrant, but Elaine always disappeared before being captured. The pursuit of her was a breathtaking game of cat and mouse that spanned over 2 decades for investigators. The answers will gradually be revealed. Like and subscribe to our channel to uncover this mystery with us. In 1989, Beverly McGowan, 34 years old, was going through a severe emotional crisis after her boyfriend passed away in a car accident. Despite trying to open up to new relationships, the fear of loss always haunted her, making her cautious and reserved. Nevertheless, she quickly made efforts to regain herself and restore her joy in life. She started looking for a new place to begin again. At the beginning of 1990, Beverly decided to buy a small apartment in Pompano Beach, Florida, and moved in with her 2 beloved cats. This was an important step in her life, marking the beginning of a new chapter. However, the financial pressure from the mortgage forced her to look for a roommate. Not only would this help her reduce financial burdens, but it would also give her a sense of security during a psychologically unstable period. In early July 1990, Beverly shared with her brother Steve about a frightening message from an unknown man. The message left on her answering machine said, "I know where you live, and I really hope we can be together." Shocked and worried, Beverly brought the answering machine to her workplace and played the message for her colleagues. However, everyone dismissed it as a harmless prank and advised her not to overthink it. About a week after receiving the eerie voicemail, Beverly placed an advertisement for a roommate on the Sun Sentinel. By mid-July, a British woman in her 40s named Alice quickly reached out. Alice claimed to be an IBM employee who had just been transferred from London to the Fort Lauderdale office. With a successful appearance, confidence, a luxury car, and a refined fashion sense, Alice easily left the impression of being an ideal and trustworthy tenant. After viewing the apartment, Alice expressed her desire to move in immediately. The two decided to meet to discuss details and went out for drinks together. With her skillful persuasion, Alice convinced Beverly to let her rent the room. She moved into the apartment the very next day. On the night of July 17, 1990, just a few days after Alice moved in, Beverly suddenly vanished without a trace. 2 days later, her family and friends received strange handwritten letters from Beverly. In them, Beverly stated she was selling her apartment and starting a new life without disclosing her location. "I'm doing this because it feels right. When I return, I'll be better and happier," Beverly wrote in the letter. These letters were sent from Miami with a postmark dated July 18th, causing her family great concern. This behavior was entirely out of character for Beverly. They believed she was in danger and had been forced to write these letters. The fear escalated when the family discovered that Beverly had also sent a telegram to the mortgage company authorizing them to seize her apartment and liquidate her assets. Steve and Jane, Beverly's siblings, immediately went to her apartment but found only an empty and eerie space. Strangely, dirty dishes were still in the sink, her nightgown was still on the bed, and there were no signs of preparation for departure. Additionally, all of Beverly's clothes remained in the closet, except for a few important documents, such as her birth certificate, passport, and address book. These documents, along with access to her bank account and a list of her relatives, had all been handed over to Alice, her new roommate. Steve and Jane immediately went to Beverly's workplace. A colleague mentioned that Beverly had called in sick the previous day and requested some time off. The colleague noted that Beverly's voice sounded tired and hoarse, but they still recognized it as hers. After leaving the office, unable to wait any longer, Steve and Jane decided to report their sister's disappearance to the police. That same day, at around 7 p.m., Jesse Madd, a 31-year-old resident of Florida, was fishing at an isolated irrigation canal in St. Lucie County, about 160 kilometers from Pompano Beach. As he approached a dense bush, he discovered a black plastic bag floating on the water. Curious, Jesse pulled the bag ashore and was horrified to find inside the dismembered body of a woman. Some body parts, such as the head and both hands, had been detached. The perpetrator had even attempted to erase the little rabbit tattoo on the victim's abdomen. However, the killer overlooked a small tattoo on the ankle, a yellow rose. This crucial detail helped the police identify the victim as Beverly McGowan. On July 21, 1990, the police confirmed the victim's identity as Beverly McGowan after an autopsy. The results indicated that she had been murdered at a different location, most likely on July 18th, the same day she sent the letters to her family. This raised the theory that she had been attacked after writing those strange letters. Beverly's apartment was thoroughly examined, but no signs of struggle, fingerprints, fabric fibers, or hair were found. This suggested that the perpetrator was a professional with experience in eliminating evidence flawlessly. The meticulously planned nature of the crime led investigators to suspect a deeper motive. On the same day the body was found, police received a report that a woman had used Beverly's credit card to shop at the Aventura Mall in Miami. Store employees described the woman as having golden blonde hair, blue eyes, and a charming smile. She spoke with a perfect British accent and exuded confidence, leaving a strong impression on those around her. A bank report also revealed that $795 had been withdrawn from Beverly's account. With this evidence, Alice quickly became the prime suspect. However, Tracking her down was difficult due to a lack of information. Police contacted IBM and discovered that no employees had been transferred from the UK to Florida. Furthermore, the office where Alice claimed to work in Fort Lauderdale did not exist. Investigators realized that Alice's entire identity was an elaborate facade, carefully planned before she took action. This was further confirmed when a person identifying as Sam appeared at the Thunderbird travel agency in Miami shortly after Beverly's body was found. Sam used the victim's credit card to rent an Avis car, attempting to conceal his identity. He disguised himself as a woman, wearing a long black wig and oval glasses, closely resembling Beverly's appearance. He spoke with a British accent and booked a ticket on British Airways Flight 292, intending to leave the US 2 days later. Sam's destination was Heathrow Airport in London, a bustling international aviation hub. As soon as the plane landed, a man arrived to pick up the car that had been booked under Beverly's name. With a suspiciously calm demeanor, he used the victim's credit card information to complete the process. However, after removing his disguise, he ran into trouble when Beverly's family had already blocked her credit card. Sam then paid in cash and drove away from the airport, vanishing without a trace. No one knew for sure who Sam or Alice truly was. Were they the same person, or were they accomplices? However, the discovery of unusual transactions in London using Beverly's credit card led the investigation to expand internationally. US investigators immediately contacted the British authorities to collaborate on tracking down the person who had illegally used the victim's credit card. British police focused their forces at Heathrow Airport, where the suspect was supposed to return the rental car. However, when the time came, the suspect had vanished without a trace. The rental car was found in a parking lot near the airport, meticulously cleaned. This further complicated the case, raising suspicions that the suspect had used a false identity to leave the UK. The US police launched a large-scale investigation on flights returning to America. Dozens of detectives were deployed to airports, thoroughly screening passengers, but all efforts proved fruitless. The only remaining lead was British Airways Flight 292, which Sam had allegedly booked. US authorities reviewed the passenger list but found no trace of Alice or Sam. Beverly's name was also missing from the list, proving that none of them had used her passport to board the flight. The suspect had used a different identity. 6 days after Beverly's body was discovered, on July 25, 1990, her red Volkswagen Fox was found at a rest area near Miami International Airport. The car had been there for 5 days, but fingerprint analysis yielded no results. However, investigators found 4 black synthetic hairs on the driver's headrest. They began checking every passenger on Flight 292, but due to jurisdictional issues, the process was slow. Finally, after 6 years of investigation in 1996, Detective Rena Crowning-Sheld uncovered a shocking detail. A British passenger named Sylvia Ann Hawkinson, who had been assigned seat 18C, had died before the flight took off. How could a deceased person have boarded a plane? This question marked a major turning point in the case, as investigators began suspecting a sinister conspiracy behind Beverly's murder. Looking back into the past, in 1991, a British woman was arrested in North Miami for a traffic violation. She identified herself as Charlotte Ray Cohen and presented valid identification. However, upon closer inspection, police found 2 other identity cards in her bag, one under the name Sylvia Ann Hawkinson and another under the name Elaine Parent. At the time of her arrest, the woman was accompanied by 2 small dogs, appearing calm yet cautious. She was detained in county jail, but within hours an unidentified individual paid her bail. The next morning, she was released and received a court summons. However, in a bizarre twist at the court hearing, another woman also named Charlotte Ray Cohen appeared. The police immediately recognized that the woman arrested the previous day was an imposter, while the one appearing in court was the real Charlotte. This revelation caused a major shock. When questioned, the real Charlotte recounted a strange encounter she had with a mysterious woman. Years ago at a bar in Orlando, Florida, Charlotte met a woman with an aristocratic appearance, sharp blue eyes, and a perfect British accent. The woman introduced herself as Anne and convinced Charlotte to provide personal information for a fortune-telling session. Anne's words were mesmerizing, and Charlotte, unsuspecting, agreed. After obtaining Charlotte's personal details, Anne vanished without a trace. But weeks later, she suddenly reappeared in a panic, begging Charlotte for help by borrowing her birth certificate to create a new identity. She cried, claiming that she was being pursued and that if she didn't get new documents, she would be in grave danger. At first, Charlotte refused, but faced with Anne's tears and sheer terror, she relented. Anne promised to return the documents soon. True to her word, 3 weeks later, Charlotte received her birth certificate in the mail. However, from that moment on, she never saw or heard from Anne again. It wasn't until Charlotte received a court summons for a crime she had never committed that she realized she had been deceived. The woman arrested that day was neither Anne, Sylvia, nor Alice. The police quickly identified the imposter's true identity: Elaine Parent, a master con artist, later infamously known as the Chameleon Killer. Elaine Parent was born and raised in the Bronx, New York. In her 30s, she moved to Florida and began a long series of criminal activities. Her criminal record started in 1985, when a failed theft attempt led to her being pursued by the police. To evade capture, Elaine fled to London, where she learned to speak fluent, native-level English and perfected her identity fraud skills. While living in London, Elaine befriended a homeless woman named Sylvia Ann Hawkinson. However, this friendship was merely a cover for a sinister plan. Seeing that Sylvia lived alone and had no close family, Elaine murdered her. Afterward, Elaine stole Sylvia's identity. She used Sylvia's personal details to forge a fake passport, re-entered the United States, and continued committing fraud under her new identity. The police had no leads on Sylvia's murder, as no one had ever reported her missing. The discovery of Elaine Parent's true identity opened a new chapter in the investigation. She was not just a sophisticated con artist, but also a highly dangerous serial killer who may have killed multiple victims without ever being caught. But the biggest question remained: where was Elaine? In the years that followed, Elaine Parent continued her escape and crime spree, using over 20 different identities. She stole identities from both men and women across both sides of the Atlantic. Her victims were either scammed, murdered, or suffered both fates at once. In fact, Charlotte Ray Cowan was the only known survivor after encountering Elaine. All other victims either disappeared or were brutally murdered. Elaine would typically befriend her targets, gain their trust, then kill them before stealing their documents and assuming their identities. The bodies of her victims were often mutilated to conceal their identities and delay their discovery. While police struggled to determine the true identity of each victim, she had already moved on to a new target and continued her cycle of crimes. Elaine was described as a master con artist, a skilled actress with an unpredictable ability to transform herself. She possessed an irresistible charm, was highly adept at gaining trust, and would strike when her victims least expected it. She could switch personas effortlessly, from a wealthy, sophisticated lady to a vulnerable woman in need, making it easy for people to fall into her trap. With razor-sharp intelligence and extraordinary impersonation skills, Elaine even mocked law enforcement. Her nickname, the Chameleon, was not assigned by the police. It was her own creation. A hand-drawn postcard was sent to the police department with a message: "Best wishes from your chameleon," a blatant challenge to investigators. By constantly changing her appearance, assuming multiple identities, and frequently moving between the US and the UK, Elaine successfully evaded capture for nearly 2 decades. But in the end, she made one fatal mistake, leading to her downfall. After being arrested in 1991 under the false identity of Charlotte Ray Cowan, Elaine was asked to provide additional documents. Investigators, who had been closely tracking Beverly McGowan's murder case, discovered that Elaine possessed Sylvia Hawkinson's identification card, a victim who had been dead for years. Detecting suspicious elements, the police began to re-examine all the evidence related to Beverly's murder. They paid particular attention to a notebook found in Beverly's apartment, which contained farewell letters believed to have been written by her before she disappeared. At first glance, the letters were written entirely in Beverly's handwriting. But when forensic experts used an electrostatic detection apparatus, ESDA, they uncovered hidden writing impressions beneath the visible text. These hidden markings were invisible to the naked eye, but they revealed someone had manipulated the letter's content. When the concealed writing was restored, it contained an angry, vengeful message. "You will pay for this. I guarantee it. After what you've done, I have no regrets about destroying what I created." The handwriting perfectly matched Elaine Parent's own script, proving that she had been present at Beverly's apartment at the time the letters were written. This became the most crucial piece of evidence linking Elaine to the crime. But the mystery did not end there. The ESDA device also revealed the intended recipient's address for this hostile letter. Police followed the address and found a key witness, a person referred to as Witness X. Witness X was a businesswoman in London who had received this letter from Elaine years earlier. When questioned, she confirmed that Elaine was her former lover with a deeply troubled past. In 1990, shortly after breaking up with Witness X, Elaine stole 2 of her small dogs and later demanded ransom money for their return. This detail matched exactly with the 2 small dogs found in Elaine's car when she was arrested under the fake identity of Charlotte Ray Cowan in 1991. By this point, the puzzle pieces were finally falling into place. Elaine was Anne, the con artist who had deceived Charlotte Ray Cowan. She was also Sylvia Ann Hawkinson, the woman who had used a stolen identity to board Flight 292. And most importantly, she was Alice, the roommate who had murdered Beverly McGowan. The only question left was, where was Elaine now? With her expert disguise skills and 17 years of experience evading capture, she had frustrated law enforcement on both sides of the Atlantic for years. Beverly McGowan's case was first featured on the TV show Unsolved Mysteries in 1991, shocking the American public. Famous host Robert Stack confirmed that Elaine Parent was one of the most wanted women in the world at that time. The show America's Most Wanted also aired an alert to help locate the chameleon killer, leading many Americans to pay closer attention to anyone resembling Elaine. On April 6, 2002, after over a decade in hiding, a viewer of the fugitive program provided a critical tip leading police to Elaine Parent's hideout, a small apartment in Panama City, Florida, where she was living under yet another false identity. When police knocked on the door, Elaine answered with a calm demeanor. She was wearing pajamas and holding a military ID card under the name Dolan Thompson. At first glance, the ID seemed valid, but police insisted she come to the station for questioning. Elaine asked for permission to change clothes before leaving. While officers waited outside, one officer double-checked her ID and found it was fake. Sensing something was off, another officer knocked on Elaine's bedroom door. From inside, Elaine calmly responded, "I'm still changing. Give me a moment." No one knew that these would be her final words. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. When police stormed into the room, they found Elaine had taken her own life using a .357 Magnum revolver. The woman who had evaded capture for nearly 2 decades, the chameleon killer, had chosen to end her own life rather than face justice. At the scene, police found a collection of wigs, disguises, fake identification documents, and even stage makeup guides, all the tools Elaine had used to change her appearance over the years. Elaine Parent was quietly buried at the age of 60, taking all her darkest secrets to the grave. But the case was not truly over. The most haunting question remained: how many people had Elaine really killed? Police confirmed she had taken the lives of at least 8 victims and had stolen countless identities during her years in hiding. However, many believed that Elaine was connected to even more unsolved murders that were never discovered. During the investigation, police were never able to find her birth certificate or any official documents proving Elaine's true identity. This raised a chilling theory. Could Elaine herself have been living under a stolen identity all along? Could she have been a missing person who was never reported, or an unidentified victim from another crime? While Elaine's true origins remained a mystery, the families of her victims, including Beverly McGowan's family, finally found some relief, knowing that the killer was no longer a threat. But what about the second suspect? The mysterious man named Sam, who had used Beverly's credit card to book a flight and rent a car, was never found. The case was only partially solved, as Sam's identity and whereabouts remained unknown. But one chilling possibility couldn't be ruled out. Did Sam even exist? Or was he simply one of Elaine's many disguises? The case ends here, but Elaine Parent's legacy remains one of the most haunting mysteries in true crime history. What do you think about Elaine Parent? How many more victims remain undiscovered? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. This video is now concluded. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so we can continue bringing you more strange, emotional, and gripping cases. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. At around 8 a.m. on March 22, 2020, in a rental house near People's Hospital No. 1 in Yulin, Guangxi, China, a nurse living on the 2nd floor discovered that the drainage pipe in her room was clogged. The landlord and a plumber came to inspect. When they dismantled the pipe, they were horrified to find pieces of human flesh mixed with sludge and water. A strong stench filled the air, sending chills down everyone's spine. The landlord immediately called the police. When the authorities arrived, they quickly sealed off the scene and collected tissue samples for examination. The results confirmed 2,368 tissue fragments, all belonged to a human. Faced with such a horrifying crime scene, the public questioned, what could have driven the perpetrator to commit such a gruesome act? Like and subscribe to our channel as we uncover the mystery behind this bizarre case. At around 10 a.m. on March 22, 2020, the police quickly inspected suspicious rooms. Upon reaching a rental unit on the 3rd floor, they discovered a rice cooker in the corner containing human tissue and a black plastic bag with additional body parts. The landlord confirmed that the tenant of the 3rd floor apartment was a young woman named Fengping. Immediately, the police identified Fengping as the prime suspect in the case. That afternoon, at around 2 p.m., as the 3rd floor tenant was on her way home from work, she was suddenly apprehended by the police on the spot. Upon seeing the suspect, no one could believe their eyes. A petite young woman with a gentle face, slender figure, and a ponytail. However, behind this delicate appearance lay a horrifying truth. The suspect was Fengping, a nurse at People's Hospital No. 1 in Yulin. At the police station, she calmly confessed to all of her actions. She had murdered Luo Pang, the deputy head of the spinal surgery department at the hospital, then attempted to dispose of the body by dissolving it and flushing it down the drainage system. A few days earlier, the police had received a call from Luo Pang's wife, reporting that her husband had been missing for 2 days. So what was the relationship between Fengping and Luo Pang? Why did everything end in a gruesome murder? The answers would gradually unfold as the investigation continued. Fengping was born in 1995 into a poor family in a small village in Bobai County, Guangxi Province. Her family was among the poorest in the village, living in an old and simple house. Fengping was the eldest of 4 siblings, carrying many responsibilities, especially since her mother was terminally ill and unable to work. Her father, despite taking on various odd jobs to make a living, tried his best to save money so that his children could attend school. Despite financial difficulties, he always believed that education was the only way for his children to escape poverty. Li Fengping's father had to drop out of school due to extreme poverty, but since then he was determined to ensure his children received a full education. Thanks to his sacrifices, none of his 4 children had to drop out, and Li Fengping was able to continue her studies despite the family's hardships. Besides Li Fengping, her second sister was also accepted into a teacher training college in Guangxi. Third sister and youngest brother both attended the best high school in the county. Li Fengping's father was very proud of raising successful children. From a young age, Li Fengping was diligent and hardworking, balancing school with part-time jobs. At times when her mother was seriously ill, Li took on the responsibility of caring for her siblings while maintaining top grades in her class. With such achievements, Li Fengping could have been admitted to the best high school in the county. However, due to financial constraints, her father decided she should attend a technical college, thinking it would take only 5 years to graduate. Whereas if she pursued a university degree, it would take at least 7 years before she could start working. Without opposing her father's decision, Li Fengping chose to study nursing, partly because she had experience caring for her mother from a young age. In 2017, Li Fengping graduated from Guangxi Medical University with excellent academic performance. Each semester, she received a 6,000 yuan scholarship from the Youlu Foundation. After graduating, Li Fengping quickly received job offers from 3 hospitals through her university's recruitment program. One hospital in Nanning, which offered the best career growth opportunities. Another in Liuzhou, which provided the highest salary. Finally, People's Hospital No. 1 in Yulin. While it wasn't known for high salaries or career advancement, it had one key advantage: proximity to her home. It was only a 2-hour taxi ride to Bobai County, where her mother was seriously ill, meaning she could easily visit and take care of her. After discussing with her father, Li Fengping chose People's Hospital No. 1 in Yulin, sacrificing a higher salary and better prospects to stay close to her family. However, life did not turn out as she expected. Apart from Lunar New Year, Li Fengping barely had time to visit home. She rented a small 30-square room in an alley behind the hospital. Although old, cramped, and deteriorated, with a rent of only 350 yuan per month, the room significantly reduced her living expenses. Initially, while working at the hospital, Li Fengping had to undergo a 3-year rotation training program. Every few months, she was transferred to a different department. Each time, she had to start over, performing the most basic tasks like a trainee nurse. Li Fengping's starting salary was very low, only around 2,000–3,000 yuan per month. Although it could increase to 7,000 to 8,000 yuan after a few years, there was no guarantee she wouldn't be transferred again and have to start from scratch. In June 2018, Li Fengping was assigned to the neonatal department before being transferred to the spinal surgery department. One night during her shift, while talking with Liu Moxia, Li Fengping was introduced to an online gambling game. Liu Moxia, the head nurse of the hospital, was the one who inadvertently introduced Li Fengping to gambling. Initially, Liu Moxia played the game just to earn some extra spending money, but the financial pressure of buying a house pushed her deeper into it. According to Liu Moxia, the game had a very simple playing mechanism. At first, Liu Moxia placed bets for fun, but once, she lost over 100 yuan in a single round. Realizing the dangers, she decided to stop. Soon after, she uninstalled the app and advised Li Fengping to play only for fun and not get too involved. No one expected that this casual suggestion would ultimately lead Li Fengping down the path of crime. This online lottery game did not require phone number registration or identity verification, allowing unlimited betting. Players could select numbers from 10 groups using Arabic numerals from 1 to 10 to place bets. Initially, the system deliberately allowed new players to win a few rounds, making them believe that it was an easy way to make money. In reality, the game was programmed to lure players into a losing cycle. This quickly trapped Li Fengping in a gambling addiction. At first, the betting amounts were only a few hundred yuan, but they quickly escalated to tens of thousands. There were days when Li Fengping lost hundreds of thousands of yuan in a single round. Despite this, she did not stop, always hoping that one big win would turn everything around. The largest amount of money Li Fengping won in a single day was 100,000 yuan. However, within a year, her 2 bank accounts had processed a total of 2.9 million yuan in transactions related to online gambling. This was an enormous sum for a nurse who had been working for less than 3 years. Gradually, the mounting debt became uncontrollable. She fell into despair, desperately seeking money by any means. At this moment, a terrifying plan began to take shape in her mind. Unwilling to accept defeat, Li Fengping came up with a bold idea: borrowing money to continue gambling. She believed that as long as she won big, all her debts would be erased. From then on, Li Fengping started borrowing money from everywhere, using her mother's illness as an excuse to ask colleagues for help. Thanks to her gentle appearance, she easily gained people's trust. At first, she borrowed only a few thousand yuan. Each time she received her salary, she repaid part of her debt, making people trust her even more and willingly lend her more money. Gradually, the borrowing frequency increased and the amounts grew larger, turning her colleagues into an endless source of funds. In July 2019, Li Fengping secured a loan of 300,000 yuan from the Bank of China through a financial aid program for medical staff in Yulin City. However, this amount was still not enough. She continued borrowing from colleagues with various excuses, from medical expenses for her mother to marriage and house purchases. Even when senior nurses started to suspect and outright refused, Li Fengping did not stop. On the contrary, some younger nurses who had a close relationship with her were still willing to help without hesitation. Some colleagues even recklessly used their own personal information to take out loans of 300,000 yuan each for Li Fengping. Despite drowning in debt, Li Fengping never sought help from her family. When loans from colleagues were no longer sufficient, she turned to online lending platforms, despite most of them charging illegally high interest rates of up to 36% per year. Within just 6 months, Li Fengping's bank account was flooded with loans from numerous different platforms. Li Fengping gradually became 2 completely opposite people. On one hand, every day she gambled away hundreds of thousands of yuan, or even more, on online betting games. On the other hand, her personal life was extremely frugal. She continued living in an old rented room for just 350 yuan per month, in poor and harsh conditions. Even when she wanted to buy a refrigerator, Li Fengping hesitated for a long time, debating whether she should buy it or not. In the end, she only dared to order a refrigerator worth a few hundred yuan on Taobao. By October 2019, Li Fengping had fallen into deep despair, burdened with insurmountable debt and no way out. In the end, she had no choice but to approach Luo Pang, a 51-year-old deputy head of spinal surgery, to borrow money. Luo Pang was married, living with his wife and a daughter who was in high school. He was very wealthy and drove a BMW SUV to the hospital every day. When Li Fengping asked for help, Luo Pang agreed to lend her money. However, he imposed a condition in return. They then arranged to meet at a luxury hotel near the hospital. For Li Fengping, this was the fateful day that changed her life forever. As she entered the room, she was shocked to see Luo Pang wearing only a pair of shorts. Stunned, she immediately turned to leave. However, Luo Pang did not let her leave. Under his coercion, she had no choice but to comply. The next morning, Luo Pang handed her 50,000 yuan. From October 2019 to February 2020, Luo Pang and Li Fengping met 13 times. After each meeting, Luo Pang would transfer money to Li Fengping. By March 2020, the total amount she had received had reached 200,000 yuan. However, the humiliation remained deeply imprinted in Li Fengping's mind. Yet, Luo Pang was still not satisfied. He constantly threatened her. "Do you think you can escape from me? I have connections in security agencies and the prosecution office. If you dare report to the police, I won't let you go." At first, Li Fengping felt helpless, fearing both revenge and the possibility of her family being implicated. But as her desperation grew, she began to consider ending her life. Li Fengping attempted suicide 3 times, but each time she failed. The first time, she prescribed herself 100 sleeping pills. She had long suffered from chronic insomnia, sleeping only 3 to 4 hours a day. That day, she swallowed 80 pills, but instead of slipping into a critical state, she only experienced severe vomiting. The second time, she left the gas valve open all night, but it did not work. And the third time, she took advantage of her job, stealing 2 vials of insulin from the hospital and injecting herself with 800 units. Yet, even death turned its back on Li Fengping. She continued sinking into despair and hopelessness. In March 2020, due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, hotels stopped accepting guests. Luo Peng demanded that Li Fengping rent an apartment near the hospital for their meetings, promising to cover all expenses. Li Fengping had no other choice but to comply. On the night of March 20th, Luo Peng arrived at the apartment in a drunken state. As soon as he stepped through the door, he immediately undressed and ordered Li Fengping to serve him. However, at that moment, Li Fengping was engrossed in online gambling and did not want to pay attention to him. She continuously made excuses, saying she had not eaten or had not taken a shower. This angered Luo Peng. He began insulting her with harsh and degrading words. After a while of berating her, Luo Peng fell asleep, his loud snoring echoing in the silent room. At that moment, Li Fengping sat quietly on the edge of the bed, clenching her hands tightly, her whole body trembling as she suppressed her fury. Humiliating memories flooded back, and her hatred reached its peak. In a fit of rage, Li Fengping opened her phone and typed into the search bar, "What to do if you hate someone?" Instantly, a chilling suggestion appeared in the search results: make them disappear. At around 1 a.m., Li Fengping grabbed a computer cable and slowly walked towards the bed. She looped the cable around Luo Peng's neck. Luo Peng woke up in shock and struggled fiercely. A few minutes later, Luo Peng's body gradually became motionless. Seeing this, Li Fengping trembled as she touched his carotid artery to check for a pulse and found no response. By instinct, she hurriedly tried to perform CPR, but it was useless. Luo Peng was dead. At that moment, Li Fengping panicked, realizing she was in deep trouble. But shortly after, she regained her composure, unlocked Luo Peng's phone using his fingerprint, and transferred 98,000 yuan to her account. However, in an instant, most of the money was deducted by the online loan system, leaving only 900 yuan. Still unable to accept failure, Li Fengping desperately tried every possible way to take all of Luo Peng's money. She took half-body photos of Luo Peng, his bank card, and his ID card, intending to use the information to borrow more money. Before dawn, Li Fengping continuously searched for ways to completely destroy evidence, as well as how to transfer ownership of a car and health insurance without being detected. By 8 a.m. on March 21st, after committing the crime, Li Fengping did not panic or attempt to flee. She calmly dressed neatly and went to work at the hospital as if nothing had happened. Around 6 p.m., Li Fengping returned to the rented apartment and began processing Luo Peng's body. The process lasted 20 hours from 8 p.m. to 5 p.m. the next day. She spent over 2,000 yuan on tools. What happened in that rented room was truly gruesome and unimaginably cruel. During that time, Li Fengping also returned to her old apartment to retrieve clothes, discard her stained white shoes, and search Luo Peng's car for a loan document she had written. However, she could not find any documents because they were stored in Luo Peng's office cabinet. Later, a nurse from the spinal surgery department discovered the loan documents. To buy time and avoid suspicion, Li Fengping even pretended to be the victim, using Luo Peng's phone to text his wife. When his wife asked why he had not come home for days, she replied that Luo Peng was busy performing surgery in the suburbs. That night, when Luo Peng's wife called, she even texted back, saying he was drunk and did not want to answer. However, by the night of March 26th, feeling uneasy, Luo Peng's wife decided to call the hospital to check her husband's schedule. She quickly discovered that her husband had no scheduled surgeries in recent days. Sensing something was wrong, she immediately reported it to the police, leading to an investigation that soon revealed the horrifying truth behind Luo Peng's mysterious disappearance. Police launched an investigation, reviewed security camera footage, and discovered that the victim had entered Li Fengping's home before disappearing. Li Fengping was arrested and confessed to the murder. When her father heard the news of his daughter's crime, he collapsed, unable to believe the truth. Trembling, he said, "Just 1 year. How could just 1 year destroy my daughter like this? What has she become?" On October 30th, 2020, the Intermediate People's Court of Yulin sentenced Li Fengping to death for murder and theft. She was not granted any sentence reduction due to the exceptionally cruel and premeditated nature of her crime. Li Fengping's case was not just a simple crime, but a reflection of a troubling social issue. From a poor girl full of ambition, Li Fengping suddenly became a gambling addict, dragged into an abyss. Luopang's family expressed sorrow, but felt some relief, knowing that justice had been served. Thank you for following this story. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more shocking and mysterious cases. Remember, no matter how terrifying the truth is, it must be